First of all, thank you to John and Hugo for their presentation that they've given this morning. You're going to hear a little bit of a different side of it right now because I'm not an engineer. I don't know how those molar diagrams and all those other fancy things are all made, but I'm a grower. And it's a difference that is pretty important. And I believe that for many of you here today, a lot of this technical kind of information you're seeing is difficult to put into practice. So what I'm going to try and do is take you through what we have done, why we've done what we have, without all the engineering and everything behind it that we're still using without even knowing it. So what I want to do first is I'll give you a little bit of background of our company, because it's not every day that you come to Holland to hear somebody from America speak. It's usually people have Dutch accents that speak here because this is where the center of the universe is. But what they say a lot of times is that adversity is the mother of all inventions. And that's a little bit of the background of what has happened to us. And I'll just give a little bit of background, like I said earlier, onto how we got where we are. I was born in Vancouver, which is a city on the west coast of Canada. For those of you who don't know, it's about the same latitude as Paris, France. Similar climate to Holland. A lot of Dutch people have settled there. There's a lot of greenhouses there. So we can actually take Dutch technology and use a Dutch grower and grow it the same way, because we have pretty well the same kind of light. Sure, we're a little bit further south, but a lot of the temperatures are similar. There's a lot of similar things, but we have the same problems the Dutch do, and that is winter production. And when we started, and it was many years ago already, back in 1992, when we were growing tomatoes, and I recognized the fact that if you want to grow tomatoes, you have to be there 12 months out of the year. The consumer in today's world does not know that it's Christmas time and tomatoes don't grow at Christmas. They're still expecting there. And if you don't produce in that gap, through that winter period, what are you doing? You're actually building opportunities for your competitor. So how do you stop that? You can either put in lights, or you build a facility in the south. And that's what happened to us as we started looking south. Did a joint venture in Mexico in the Culiacan area for 2.5 years. But the cultural differences are just too great. Not to say it can't be done, and for some people it can very well be done. But for me, not knowing the language and the cultures and everything else, the way it worked, it was a very difficult transition. So rather than going to Mexico, we ended up buying some property in California, which is just a little bit north of Los Angeles, and once again on the west coast. Why did we choose the coast? Because we know the coast. So you think you're going to go down there, you're going to grow on the coast, and all things are going to be great. You have more light, you've got pretty moderate climate, so it looks like it's going to be easy. It isn't. What happens to us when we were down there? First of all, you got something called the Santa Ana winds. Santa Ana wind is when the wind reverses and you get it out of the desert. Very hot, can happen any time of the year between October and March, where you can have rain one day, temperatures of 15 or 16 degrees, and the next day it can be 32 or 34 with humidities of below 10%, and a wind of 80 kilometers at the same time. A little bit similar to the Mistrals in France, if you can compare those things. Very hard on the plants, huge transitions. That's one problem. We learned how to deal with that a little bit different ways as we got on. But as we progressed, we built our first greenhouse there in 1996 of 8 hectares, and another 8 hectares in 1998. And then in 1999, we built another 18 hectares. And we were learning how to grow in this different southern climate. We were growing counter-cyclical, which is one of the first things that you have to learn how to do, because you got to produce in the winter. So you don't start on dark conditions as we were used to doing in Vancouver. We started on lighter conditions. But as the years went on, we started getting more and more whitefly pressures. For those of you who know about biblical proportions of what happened to Pharaoh when the Israelites were trying to get out of were trying to flee Egypt, you hear about locusts and you hear about frogs and you hear about the water turned to blood. One of the things they didn't hear about there was whitefly. We found out that there was not 10 plagues but 11. The other one's called whitefly. Well, the whitefly got thicker and thicker and thicker every year. And it almost looked at times like we were back in Canada, it was snowing. That's how bad it got. Now, whitefly on their own are not so much of an issue. You can kind of deal with them until you get viruses. For those of you living in the southern part of the producing areas, the further south you go, the more viruses you get. You don't have the winter kill. So with all the viruses, you end up getting, what happens to your crop? Your tomato crop is finished in very short order. There's only one thing you can do about it, is put on insect screen. You got 22,000 vents, they need insect screen. Spend $2 million putting the insect screen in to keep the whitefly out. The challenges that come with that, you have reduced airflow, and when these winds are blowing and you have these low humidities, you get dust and they plug up and you got to clean them. And when you're cleaning them, water drops down, you get Corynebacteria, you get all other kind of issues that affect you. But worse problem you get is 15% less light. You've heard a little bit more about this morning about how important light is. I learned to hate screens, in spite of the fact that they solved our virus issue. I had dreams very often about insect screens, and I dreamed how we were going to conquer those things one day. So that's really the start of the ultra clean greenhouse. You think about it some more, and your first thought is, well, let's just get rid of the screens. Build a greenhouse with no roof vents. We all know what kind of challenges that's going to make. You see what they're doing in Holland in closed greenhouses. You see some of the other issues. Then you start thinking, and the more you think, the more ideas you get. You bounce the ideas off a few guys. You talk to Cubo, you talk to a Dutch grower, you talk to some engineers, and at the end of the day, you put a system together, and they say, voila, I think that's going to work. But oftentimes, when you think things are going to work, they don't always do what you're going to think they are. So what do? You do a test first. So we started a test in one of the older facilities, and we did a retrofit, and we started it up, and we learned enough in that retrofit to step out and design a complete different greenhouse that does, amongst other things that you heard Priva talk about and you heard Hugo talk about. They were talking more about the advantages of a climate, whereas our goal at that time was really how can we get rid of the insect screens. So we did. Now with that, I'm just going to play a video right now so you can kind of see a little bit more about our facility and what this new Ultra Klima looks like. And then I'll go back and give more of a growing perspective of what it takes to grow in. I had to bring my trusty secretary along, so because I'm technically a little bit inept. So if this doesn't work, it's not my fault. It's actually my daughter. She's just, I'm training her how to be a grower. Think you can do it? Hopefully. Okay. All right.
California's farmers are being hit hard by climate change, a 7-year drought, even bee colony collapse. But what if they could control growing conditions? Well, one farmer in Camarillo is doing just that on a grand scale, investing in tomato futures. You're looking at the most sophisticated, technically advanced greenhouse farming operation in existence. 125 acres of glass structures just an hour north of LA. This is Houweling Nurseries. What the space shuttle is to aviation, this is to farming.
So would it be fair to say that this is probably the most high-tech, state-of-the-art greenhouse in the country?
In the world.
Inside are endless rows of perfect tomatoes growing in a nutrient-rich liquid diet, a diet that requires no soil, none at all.
We feed it the nitrogen and the potassium and all the other elements such as iron and zinc. Computers monitor everything. So it's really quite a step away from the field farming to a much more scientific level where you'll get 20 times the production per acre in a facility like this.
And the waste? In the field, nearly half of all tomatoes don't meet consumer standards. Here, only 2% are rejected.
This holds water. It's essentially inert. It's also a very porous media.
The plants sink their roots in coconut fiber.
It drains, and it's also a natural product. When we're done with it, it goes out to green waste, and it can be composted and recycled.
These vines grow about a foot a week, and since it's all enclosed, there are no bugs, no weeds, no fungus. That means no pesticides, no herbicides, no fungicides.
All those things that none of us really want to use. The greenhouse basically eliminates 98% of the use of those products.
But these tomatoes are not organic.
The real position on organic is then you can't feed them fertilizers, liquid fertilizers or chemical fertilizers, which we do here.
You do feed fertilizers.
But we think of ourselves as being better than organic.
While most farmers gauge the seasons and watch for changing weather, Casey Howling's greenhouses have just one season, the growing season. Crops are grown year-round in an environment that can only be called tomato nirvana. What makes this greenhouse more advanced than any other are the computer systems that control the temperature, the humidity, and the carbon dioxide levels.
When do I start the water? How much water do I give them? What's the nutrient levels? There's a huge amount of factors.
So why aren't other farmers copying this operation? Professor Terry Fujimoto runs a hydroponic greenhouse at Cal Poly Pomona. So if hydroponic farming is so fantastic, then what is keeping it from spreading across California?
Money. And it's very expensive to let's say, take an acre and convert it into a hydroponic operations.
The most recent expansion of the Howling's nursery cost $50 million. And there are still some circumstances beyond their control. In 2000, before better screens were installed, a tiny but powerful pest got through.
We had a plague here, it was called the whitefly plague. We ended up having to clean the whole facility out and replant it all. And that was a pretty significant hit that we took. But not only did that happen, that was also the same time that the blackouts were happening in California. So it was almost like the perfect storm.
They have since built their own power source. Solar panels now give them nearly total energy independence.
It's compressed foam material. And they're
Another limitation, not every crop can be grown in greenhouses. Some vegetables like potatoes and carrots need soil. And another concern Fujimoto raises, water.
If we have long periods of drought, we're not going to replenish our water supplies.
At Howling Nurseries, they've thought of that. Every excess drop is recycled, filtered, and reused. Water bills are very low, and the only water that leaves the greenhouse is inside the tomatoes.
This one's done.
These tomatoes do cost a bit more, but customers are buying. Greenhouse farming is still a very small part of California's $36 billion agriculture economy. But experts say it's growing by a healthy 10% a year. And its productivity is unmatched. If these tomatoes were grown in fields, you would need 24 times as much land. And that's why the future of farming may look like this.
That was taken by a local television program, and I thought it was just something that kind of shows you a little bit of an overview, and you know, it is taken from an American perspective from what happened in California, which is pretty obvious here. But I think it gives a little bit of an overview. Here's a picture of the new greenhouse with an overhead shot. You can see what the landscape is around it. It's a marine desert, so we get about 14 inches of rain a year, and there's a lot of ag around it. And that's what creates a lot of the issues with the white fly and some of those other things, because there's no winter kill. So when we designed the greenhouse, where I left off is we didn't want any roof vents, but you still needed some roof vents with the design we created, and we put in through a calculation that some real smart engineer did, and figured out you only need 4% of the vents. If all you do with a roof vent in the greenhouse is exit air, you only need 4%. So it gives you a bit of an indication of how inefficient our typical Venlo style greenhouse is, because air does not do well when it goes in and out the same hole. You get much more air exchange than what you'd calculated on, and it creates efficiencies or inefficiencies that we didn't really quite understand when we built this new greenhouse. And they came in when we started doing it. We started growing, we were actually quite surprised, because we put all these pad and fan systems in it that you have seen that were presented prior to it. But what we found, we thought we were going to be using a lot of water. We used very little. Because you move less air and you use the air much more efficiently and you have complete control of it, your plants, the evaporative cooling in the plant is much greater or much more effective than it is in a standard greenhouse. So the cooling temperature, even without the use of the pad, on a sunny day can be 4 degrees lower without the use of cooling pads than it is in a standard greenhouse, because the plants do so much cooling. Thing we have to learn too is when you set the temperature, like what John had said, you get it. The biggest mistake you make as a grower is you think 21's the perfect temperature. When you get 21, you find out pretty quick that it's not the perfect temperature. One thing you have to realize when you're growing in a system like this is plants don't lie. Don't look at your computer, go to the plant, and if the plant tells you it's too cold, guess what? It's too cold. If the plant's getting too thin, then guess what? It's too warm. And you really need to have a good grower that ties into these kind of issues, because otherwise you're going to say 21's the perfect temperature, the perfect CO2 level is 700 ppm, or whatever number you want to take, and the perfect humidity is X. And what our perceptions are of what a plant really wants are quite different. And that's where you need to learn how to grow different in a house like this. So when you look at this is a picture of the inside of the greenhouse, and this is where the air comes through. So this is where the insect screen is, and it pulls the air in. And here's the tubes underneath. Now these tubes have holes all the way from one end to another. The closer you get to the walkway, the closer the holes get together. It's engineered, calculated out so that you have complete, consistent distribution throughout. When we first put the tubes in, we thought, all the engineers at this thing perfectly calculated it was going to be exactly right. Well, guess what? It wasn't. One of the things that they failed to see was that it's 110 meters from here to where the fan box is, but the speed of the air at the fan box is 100% of the air you're putting through. The speed at the end of the tube is you get down to 0, so progressively the air speed gets slower and slower. The real problem is that not that the air distribution is uneven or irregular, but it's the angle that the air comes out of the holes. So when you got fast moving air and it comes out of a hole, it's not going to make a 90-degree turn. It's going to make, it starts at 22 degrees or whatever, and you end up getting false circulation in your greenhouse. And we had bad climate conditions over at the one end, too high humidities. Once again, you look at the plants, you can tell they don't like it. Too vegetative at one end. So we did some more thinking of how are we going to come to a solution of this. Engineer worked at it. I thought at the end of the day we came up with a solution, which is a double tube. So there's a tube inside of this tube, and the holes are spaced out different, so when the air comes out of the inside tube, it's coming at an angle, but it's got to actually straighten out before it comes out of the holes. Right now, in a 20-acre greenhouse this size, you can control the temperature variance will be no more than a half a degree anywhere. Some of the most consistent air distribution that you can get. Your humidity distribution is very good, and you've almost got what really is as close to a perfect climate as you think you can get. You would think grower's paradise, but you got lots of bells and whistles. You need to know what humidity you want, you need to know what temperatures you want, you need to know what you want to do with your pre-night, you need to know what CO2 levels you're going to use according to light intensity and everything else. So it takes a good grower. Do not underestimate the skill that it takes to do this. Oftentimes the mistake is you think the more you spend on a greenhouse, the better the results are going to be. Not necessarily the case. I often compare it to a Lamborghini and an old Volkswagen Bug. Anybody can drive a Volkswagen Bug as long as it's automatic, right? But a lot of people can drive a Lamborghini too, but can you take it up to that top speed? Can you make it around the corner? And how can you maximize it? That takes skill, that takes learning. It's the same thing in a facility like this. If you want to get 100 kilos, it's not that difficult. But if you want to get 110 or 120, it is. And that's what's going to separate, that's what's going to make the difference on a greenhouse like this. And 100 kilos might seem like a lot to you from a standard greenhouse. It's about 25% more than what we got in the standard greenhouses. But more is possible. If you do everything right, you don't make any mistakes. The other advantage you can have in a greenhouse like this is you do have lower costs. You heard some of the stuff that Prevo was talking about, the less energy. We knew that when going into this, that passive ventilation doesn't cost electricity, but this does. So that's when we purchased expensive fans that would use less electricity. We were concerned about what kind of footprint are we going to have in this greenhouse. Our goal was to get this thing as close to an energy neutral as possible. That's when we put in the solar panels to generate the electricity. And this greenhouse does not have any gas heat. So where does the heat come from? We took the heat out of every possible area you could think of. The cooling facility that cools down the tomatoes, we stripped the heat out of it. Rather than blowing it out into the air, it goes into the water. Because this system here, all you need is a 45°C pipe. And so you can use low-grade heat. Very efficient on heat use because radiators are much more efficient at extracting heat out of water. We put solar thermal panels in. We put a big chiller in that cools our irrigation water down because the well water is 23°C. Better off to have cooler water because it holds higher oxygen. So we cool the irrigation water down. We cool the recirc water down, we strip that heat out, and that's what we use to heat the greenhouse. So it gets very close to being in an energy neutral state. The other thing you do is because you have less air exchanges, you use less CO2. Now, we don't have natural gas, so you gotta question yourself, where is the CO2 gonna come from? But we have a liquid CO2 source close by that comes out of Los Angeles. So we're using liquid CO2 to boost up our temperatures. And there's all kind of engineering fakes that make this all happen. But ultimately, this is a greenhouse that was designed originally by growers, perfected by engineers, to get to what we believe is some of the best affordable technology available in the world today. And that might sound like you're pounding your chest a bit, but I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. And it's proven what we can do with it. Last season, we actually took a crop for a full season, for a full 12 months. So it produced tomatoes for 12 months long. Could never do that in a standard greenhouse down there because of the climate conditions. But here, as the crop gets older and you get closer to that 12 meters, 13 meters long, you increase your humidities. Because once again, don't forget, plants don't lie. Young crops need much more stimulation so you don't get too vegetative. You can follow the old one through. What we do in here, and also add, when you looked at the video, for those of you who are keen growers, you would have noticed the crop looked a little funny. It was interplanted. That's the way we grow it. We interplant everything we do. So the greenhouse is always producing tomatoes. Produces tomatoes 52 weeks out of the year. Why is that important for us? First of all, helps cover costs because you're never out of production. But more importantly, your customer never has to worry about getting product. And that's where I think we need to focus ourselves as growers as we go on into the future and we're looking ahead. We need to think about, where is our product going to stay? Do we have consumers that look for it? Or do we just go out and we say, I want to build a greenhouse, and because it's good tomatoes, people are forced to buy it. We know from what's happened in Europe this year and what can happen to pricing. We don't want that to happen to anybody. So that's one of our philosophies, that if you grow it, you got to follow it all the way through from seed till the consumer actually buys it from the retailer. And that kind of brings up some of our philosophy. And that also means that we're concerned about the kind of footprint we do, the kind of energy we use, because we want this greenhouse to be around in 20 years or 30 years or more. And we want to leave a world behind that hasn't depleted our resources, that uses land wisely, that uses energy wisely and conserves water. So that's what we have done at this point. Can we do better? Yes. There's always room for improvement. There's maybe this new computer system program that Priva has come out will give us more understanding. But once again, the more understanding you have, the more knowledge you're going to need. So it's a challenge. We've invested a lot, not only in this facility, because these greenhouses aren't cheap. They do cost a bit more than a standard greenhouse. But at the end of the day, what are we measuring? We're not measuring the amount of energy we're using in a square meter. At least we shouldn't be. We should be measuring the kind of energy and the kind of labor we're putting into a product by the kilos that we're producing. So if you have the same labor in a facility like this and you're producing 25% more, that's really at the end of the day what you want to achieve, because our competitors are not standing still. We're seeing more and more production in Mexico. We're seeing more imports in the United States. Everybody wants to ship into the United States. Mexico has less than 10% of the wages per hour. It has virtually no environmental regulations and virtually no food safety issues. There's good facilities in Mexico, but there's an awful lot of mediocre ones. That's where our competition is because the economy is not good. Our famous hero that we often call our president has failed us a little bit on where he's taken our country to. So the pressure gets more and more on the industries and on people that are producing, because we need to be able to compete and pay higher taxes at the same time. So those are some of the challenges. I think what I want to do at this point is I'll leave it at this. I could probably go on for days on all the experiences we've had and everything else. One thing we have had, and I'll say this in closing, within this facility, is we've never given up. We've gone through a lot of issues. We've developed a lot of ways to deal with with the issues that have come up. But we've stuck to it. It's taken us, this puts us back about 15 years ago when we first started this facility, and we've gone through a lot to learn it. We were the first guy in California that basically put a kind of commercial sized tomato greenhouse down there. And because we were first, we had to learn a lot about it. But sometimes that's a great thing, because once again, when you have adversity, it makes you really figure out where you're doing it, makes you figure out which direction you're going to go. And so that's where this is at. I share this information with you. because I think it's important for us in the industry to know what we're doing. It's better for all of us if we know where our product's going to go, how we're producing it, if we can deal with all the environmental issues, if we can deal with the disease pressures and everything else that are coming out, because our competitors are not fellow high-tech greenhouse producers. They're field producers. They're Moroccan. They're Mexican. They're all these other kind of areas where you see what is happening in the world today. So with that, I think this is a great challenge for everyone that's out here to get up to that next level. We've been plateauing at the Venlo greenhouse for quite a while, and I believe that at the end of the day, this will transform our industry. If you look at what we produce here on 130 acres of greenhouses, it is the equivalent in farm gate value to 7,000 acres of field tomatoes. That's a big nut. That's using land wisely, that's using resources wisely, and it's bringing our cost of production down and our quality and produce that we're producing better. So with that, thank you, and I believe that we'll have some questions after this, if you would.
Casey, thank you very much for the inspiring speech. I do have a question to start with, if I may. Why is this greenhouse not only for the California market suitable, also for other climates? Can you explain that?
Well, I think when you looked at the Priva presentation and you looked at the Ludwig Swenson presentation, there's issues there where you can use a screen longer. Depends on what crop you're growing. You can conserve energy. You have less air exchanges when you want air exchanges, and even in Dutch climates, you can reduce humidity when you want to reduce humidity. You can take peaks off. You can lower temperatures. So is the advantage as great as it is in the south, where you have higher temperatures and a lot of other challenging aspects, such as white fly and viruses and everything else? Sure, the advantages are greater down south, but there's advantages that I think are significant enough in northern climates to make it advantageous for you. We have a Canadian facility. We have 20 hectares up in Vancouver. We still have that today. We've actually retrofitted one of the existing facilities in our propagation, where we graft tomatoes. We graft about 40 million tomato plants a year. And in the summertime, it still does sometimes get up to 30, 32 degrees. Challenging when you're grafting. So we took the peak off by installing that ultra clean in there. Maybe we only did it for 1 or 2 weeks out of the year when we really need it. But when you're dealing with the high price seeds and you're dealing with all the labor and everything else that goes into it, we felt that the cost of this thing was definitely worth it, from just the climatic perspective and the ability to control it for grafts, and also from ensuring that our customers, it doesn't matter what time of the year they're going to buy a plant, that it's going to be the right kind of quality that they're expecting.
Thank you for that so far. Any questions out of the room? Please go ahead.
Excuse me. I need to ask why you are concentrating on tomato, only tomato, not cucumber, not pepper.
Well, probably the same reason that one of the same reasons that Apple doesn't do 2,200 different products. That's Steve Jobs' biggest challenge was, how's he going to keep it down to less than 10 items? And you can see the success of that company. The more you do, the further you spread yourself out, the less focused you can become on that one product you're growing. We're tomato experts, and we're focusing on tomatoes. We do some cucumbers in another greenhouse. We do it for a different reason. We do it for customer requests, but if it was our way, we would just do one product. We do grow all the spectrums of tomatoes. We grow the grapes all the way through to beef tomatoes and anything in between, including Romas. But I think it's, in spite of the fact that it's 130 acres worth of greenhouses, you still want to focus. Don't forget, population in California is 38 million. there's plenty of market right there for one tomato greenhouse of 130 acres. We don't need to focus on more items.
Okay, this technology, it will work with all kinds of products, like pepper, for example. Pepper is expensive product.
For which?
Pepper, sweet pepper.
Peppers?
Yes.
Well, I think it'd be fabulous in peppers. Matter of fact, I'm so convinced, and I'm kind of saying a few things maybe that are contradictory, but I'm so convinced that it is better. We are actually doing a trial on some peppers. Now, we're doing it because I think that the humidity control and the ability to close the screens and everything else are very advantageous to that crop. How advantageous it's going to be, I don't know. That's why we're doing a small trial on it. And we're doing it in conjunction with a couple other people that are helping us work through this process. We will not do peppers on our existing facility, however. If we deem that this thing is going in the right direction and has lots of potential, that will be done on a different site.
My question is, why I ask you for several kinds of products? Because if you need to convert your greenhouses for this new technology, it will cost a lot. So you need to make sure that your area or your greenhouses, it is flexible to deal with any kind of, let us, valuable vegetable.
If I may answer for short. The thing is that for now we started with tomatoes. And we're starting this. The reason why is because Casey put his head out, on top of the grass, as we say in Dutch. But the thing is that it takes a long time to show the world that it will work in every area to start with. Secondly, we are convinced as Cubo that it can work for almost every crop that grows above ground. So in other words, if you grow in containers or on grow gutters, this system can work, can be beneficial. Of course, we have to prove it, and we will in time, but step by step. And now we started already the pepper test. We are building at the moment 5,000 square meters for Phalaenopsis. Now that's a pot plant, so it's a different type of crop. And it shows actually there it's a cheaper investment, for example. But you can do it with roses, with gerberas, with cucumbers, many crops.
The last question. Can we get this presentation on soft copy or?
You'd have to ask Priva about that, whether they want to give that, and Hugo, if you want to give them. So yeah, I just got their nod. So yes, I think if you just ask.
Thanks a lot.
Let's put it like this: you can go to our website. We make sure that within a week it will be on our website. You can download it. Okay. In the back? No. Anybody else here in front?
May I ask you something about the air exchange? So you do everything forced in a pressurized greenhouse. You also keep an eye on the CO2 amount, of course. How many cubic meter per square meter in the maximum situation, by let's say high radiation, you must press into this greenhouse to keep it in your, let's say, optimum condition is what you like? How many cubic meters per square meter per hour?
This is where the grower is a little different from an engineer. To me, it doesn't really matter how much it is. I look at do we have the optimum kind of climate and how much electricity we're using. That's what, in our mind, determines how much that air is going to be. I'm sure you can get that information from some of the engineers. I know one thing, the way the greenhouse was designed is that we're actually using much less capacity than what the system has been designed for. Now, what you're asking is probably an important issue if you want to do all the calculations and everything else, but I get reports every week that show how much money we're spending on CO2, how much money we're spending on fertilizer, and how much labor, and all those are the drivers of our business. And it might be nice to know the cubic meters. We probably should go out there and do that, but I'd have to ask one of the engineer guys to come out there with his Pato Bice and stick it in there and start measuring. Or maybe Prevout can do all those calculations because they're pretty smart. Do you have an answer to that? You know what the numbers are?
Yeah, well, roughly I know the numbers, but it really depends on the humidity, temperature. So
of course. I speak about a maximum situation let's say for maximum cooling. Of course, the plant is the biggest and cheapest cool machine you have in your company. That plays a main role, of course. I know that. But the pad wall is then also a part of the cooling, and then you put some air in, and that's why I asked this. How many cubic meters? Because that is in your conditions maybe 1100.
But let me add one point here. When do you think you're going to use the most air?
Sorry?
When do you think you're going to use the most air? When it's the hottest outside?
When you have very high humidities outside, humidities, then you need more.
That's right. That's correct. You got it right. And at that time, those are the most challenging times, when your humidities are high and your temperatures are high.
Yeah.
Because then you need to move more air. But you can also move too much air.
Of course.
Because what we've learned in a standard greenhouse at night, when you go into pre-night, and if the vent is 5% open, your temperature is sometimes 2 or 3 degrees lower than if it's 100% open. Because at 100% open, you're exchanging too much air.
Yeah.
And the plant doesn't have enough cooling capacity to actually maintain that demand. So that's where you need very good controls of how you control your air, how you control your pads. Because humidity is very important.
Don't blow the cooling from your own produced by your plants. Don't blow it away. Yeah? That's also for normal standard greenhouses. When you ventilate too much, you blow the cool air from the plant away. Then you must reduce. Yeah, that's true.
Are you an engineer?
No, I'm an advisor.
Advisor.
I've growers, 42
Casey,
years.
I think what important is that you said earlier that the capacity that was installed at the first time was much, much more than you actually need now. And the main reason for that...
Much higher.
Much higher. The main reason for that is the plant is the biggest cooler. Because the plant was not calculated in the total calculation to design the greenhouse.
Yeah, it's a big factor.
You said you had a lot of issues, and I'm sure you did, and you overcome most of them. Could you give us an indication of the greatest issue you overcome to succeed at this point, but also give us one if you haven't?
Probably the biggest challenge I've had was trying to figure out my wife. I still haven't gotten that one figured out.
Okay, we got that done. How about the second one?
I think probably dealing with disease pressures, the viruses. How can you interplant and stay in continuous production without having to pull? We've calculated every time we have to clean out a whole greenhouse because we have a disease that's gotten out of control, costs us $2 million for an 8-hectare greenhouse, lost production and cleanup time and everything else. The other thing we learned is that when you do a cleanup and you're in a southern climate, it doesn't mean you're not going to have disease pressures again in that facility. We've had greenhouses right now that have been green in production for over 8 years. And you say, how is that possible? But it's come by learning more and more about what causes the diseases, how do you stop it? And so, you know, what I always say is prevention wherever possible. That's why that greenhouse the new greenhouse is overpressure. Whenever you open up the door, there's always air going out. Whenever there's a broken window or whatever else it is, there's air going out. So the overpressure is your first battle of defense. The second thing we do now, after learning a long time, is we scout the complete crop at a minimum of every 2 weeks with people that know how to identify what the problems are and quick eradication. So that's gotten us to it. We take all the leaves out all the time to stop disease pressures. The ultra-klima has helped us a lot because of the air movement. We don't have to deal with botrytis issues anymore because the crop stays dry, because there's always that constant air movement that's in there. But of all the disease pressures, that has been the most challenging is the viroid. Very hard to identify. I still don't believe anybody knows how it's transported from plant to plant, how we got it. I mean, there's all kinds of questions on it, but I know one thing was we learned how to deal with it, and we've eradicated it but we're not, still not to this day 100% sure how we did it and what we did. Our belief is that it's spread by bees. But you talk to all the technician or the guru over here, he's saying no. But from our experience of seeing what the differences are, I think bees spread it. Now that's my opinion. I'm not an engineer. I never passed any university exams, primarily because I never went to university. So, but you know what? We've learned from experience, and that's what's brought us to where we are right now. You do what works.
Oh, thank you. I am an engineer, and I really appreciated your talk. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Anybody else?
From your experience, would you advise...
One moment, please.
From your experience, would you advise a new entrepreneur into the greenhouse business to go into this high-end technology, or should they take step by step?
Yes, and with critical circumstance. You've got to have a grower that knows how to read plants. And that takes that takes a long time to learn how a plant looks and what you need to do. Don't forget one thing, plants don't lie. And if you don't know how to read it, you're not going to know how to do your settings. So it's important to have a good grower that can read plants. And not all people are created equal. Many of us created don't know how to read plants, and we'll never learn because they just don't have that feeling. Some of us have been blessed with that ability and have struggled with a lot of other issues. So that I would tell anyone, it's a lot of money to put into it. Make sure you got a good grower. And good engineer too, I might add. All right.
Casey, so race drivers are hard to find, good race drivers, right? You can train them, but it's hard to find. Is there, if you can see that as a disadvantage, are there other disadvantages of the ultra-climate system, in your opinion?
Well, there always is negatives and positives. I mean, I mentioned one of them is that this uses electricity because it's a forced ventilation rather than passive. That's a negative. I think that the negatives greatly overcome the positives greatly overcome the negatives, which Hugo had kind of said. You spend 1 cubic meter more of gas to perform what you're trying to do, but you end up saving 9. So that's the same thing. The use of electricity is a necessary evil in this facility, so that's a negative. The other one is the cost. The investment's pretty high on a facility like this, but investment's high on a high-tech greenhouse to begin with. This one is a bit more money than the other ones, but I think that extra potential of productivity, once again, far overweighs it. We are looking at putting together our next expansion. We don't even think of what kind of greenhouse it's going to be. It will be an ultra-climate greenhouse because we know what it will do, and we know that the ROI on it is greatly going to outweigh anything else we can do.
Casey, also one question. You said the 100 kilo mark is for you it's for you it's a normal way of doing business. But how do you go to that 110, 120? How do you go to that extra mile? And when do you think you're there?
Well, first of all, we pulled that crop for 12-month production. And the reason we did it was because we always want to interplant in the summertime. You never want to do that in the wintertime. And the problem is if you go down to 10 months or 9.5 months, you're going to sooner or later run into problems because you're going to end up in the wintertime. So that's where our challenge was, to try and get up to that 12-month. But the plant starts getting too long. And it takes a long time to get the nutrients from the roots up to the head. And it becomes a production inhibitor. So you have to, I think, we've come to the conclusion now 9 months, 9.5 months is about as much as you're going to do to maximize the productivity out of it. So shorten the crop and get better at reading it. Varieties are different. Get the right variety for the kind of conditions you're growing. And it's new technology, so even the best grower that you can buy or that you can hire is going to have a learning curve. So you have a good grower and he's going to figure it out. He's probably going to do 100 kilos the first year. But he's not going to do 125. That might take him 2 or 3 years to get there because he's going to make a few mistakes. There's a lot of bells and whistles on there. There's a lot of dials. And it doesn't take a lot of time to make a few mistakes. You keep getting better and better at it after a while. But it takes a significant amount of time to really figure everything out and see how it all works.
Could labor ever become a limiting factor in the production of vegetables in the States in general and at your facilities in particular?
Yes, labor's always a challenge. We're investing right now in more and more grading equipment, efficiencies. We're just putting in a whole Priva labor tracking system so we can go to 100% piece rates, so we can do a better job at tracking, so that it can go straight into our AX financial report and spit out the payroll right away and take away a lot of the labor portion out of it. We think that we can chop another 15% off our labor bill. So yeah, we're concerned about labor. We're concerned about where we're going in America. We're concerned about the illegal immigrants. There's a lot of issues coming up that we need to be very concerned about. We're concerned about who's going to be our next president.
Okay, over there.
Hello, my name is Martin. I'm an horticultural engineer. And I have a technical question, but it's also related to cost because I'm Dutch. And I actually was wondering how many kilowatts do you use per square meter a year?
So you're Dutch. Are you insinuating that you're cheap?
No, I'm not cheap.
Oh, okay. No. How many kilowatts?
Of electricity.
Now what I would do is I would ask those kind of questions to put that over to Cubo. They have all that information there. One thing I want to say is that you have to be very careful with those numbers because it depends where you are. You know, it was talked a little bit about the higher the humidity is outside, the more electricity you're going to use. The lower the humidities are, the less it's going to be.
Yeah. Of course, well, it's related, of course, as well to CO2 footprint, which can be an issue in Europe, and yeah, therefore I was just thinking, how can you relate that to the energy input you have in your 125 kilograms per square meter?
Take a standard house and double it. That's the rule of thumb. We use twice as much electricity in the Ultra Klima than we do in the other houses.
And what's it then with your gas consumption? Because that is what you have in a standard house.
We don't have gas in this house.
But if you look, you know, we are calculating on various projects. And actually we are building number 8 Ultra Klima now in the world. So, you know, we're doing the math. We're making CO2 and energy balances. So what happens is, in certain situations, do you have a cogen or you're running on a boiler, or do you get liquid CO2 and geothermal? So there are many sources of energy. But what we do see is that in general, including the extra use of electricity, there's about between 15 and 35% gain on energy. So actually, and on the other side, on CO2, that could be about roughly between 25 and 35%. Reduction of CO2.
And is it
but there is a caveat.
Per kilogram or per square meter?
That's per square meter. It's even more per kilogram.
But there is a caveat. You got to know how to set it. Because
that's for sure. Yeah.
Because your heat exchangers, you know, if you're a grower and you're used to having a pipe rail system, and you think I'm going to add 5 degrees to the pipe rail, go from 40 minimum pipe to 45, you do that in this facility, I'll tell you, you're going to be using more energy than you are in a standard greenhouse, because it's so much more efficient of extracting that heat out. What we've actually done, we're now using tube temperatures much more than we are pipe temperature. So we measure what's going into the tube, and we've learned too that you can have too cold of a tubes. So our rule of thumb is the only time we go below 18 in our tube temperature is in the pre-night, because it slows down the ripening of the fruit.
Thank you.
The biggest reason for the energy reduction is one of them is that you use low-grade heat. So your return will be lower, and that's a big gain.
For example, we're putting in cogeneration right now. That, because of the low return temperature coming back at like 22 degrees C, we can increase the efficiency of our heat extraction out of our cogeneration so that the combined electricity and heat generated is pushing us up to 104% efficiency. Now that's a theoretical calculation. We'll see if we can do it. I think we will, because you're condensing all the water that you're coming out, and you're pulling a lot more heat extracting out of it. So there's a huge amount of variances, right? We use the heat that comes out of our cooler from the rest of our facility. We cool down our irrigation water, so we use the heat from that too. So for us to really tell you exactly how much that is a difficult equation. Yeah.
If you want to know more, contact us. We can make a CO2 energy balance for you. We can make a return on investment for you, and you can see it for yourself in your situation. I want to leave it with this.
I got one more comment.
Okay.
All right, if I may, there's a lot of people that have been at our facility. Talk to them. There's nothing like seeing it and seeing what it really does. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Casey.